Hello, welcome to another Azure Centric Podcast on our Azure Weekly Update News. With my name, it's Marcos Nogueira. I'm your host, and we have that beautiful and usually face Andrew Lowes. How are you doing? I'm having issues with
I'm
my
great.
language today, but that's okay.
That's all right. If you'll excuse my sporadic internet here once in a while, then we'll trade off. It'll be fine.
Absolutely. So, as you know from the last episode, Andrew is still away from his home, as you can see it, which doesn't stop us from recording this episode. I have to say that this episode, this guy is going to be kind of short because it's a monitoring week. Let's
It
per se.
is, yeah. So there was actually quite a lot of updates, but there was a lot of Kubernetes ones in there. And if you're into AKS, Azure Kubernetes Service, then by all means go and check out the updates in the Microsoft blog. There was some really cool ones, especially around compliance and database improvements this past week. However, in our podcast, although we may touch Kubernetes on occasion, we don't chat too much
Yes,
about it.
absolutely.
A very popular service in Azure, actually. As you know, I did my we're always doing those new renewals for certifications, right? And I was surprised to see a lot of containerization questions on, I think it was the 104, yes, Azure Administrator 104 exam, right? So it is becoming much more mainstream, much more popular, and it's actually a really great service to use, very robust and pretty simple to configure, even for a guy like me.
Yes,
So
it is,
uh,
and that is the dangerous of the AKS because it's so
it is,
easy
right?
to deploy. Then it's a mess when you want to scale out and you want to doing all of the
It's
things
true.
that happens. Absolutely,
It's true.
absolutely. But um,
So what we did keep was a lot of really good Azure
yes,
Monitor updates, and we had maybe, let's say, a bit of a Azure Monitor
yeah,
week.
absolutely. Although we have some kind of here and there pretty cool updates that they are coming from this week, and let's talk about it. What do you think about that?
I think that sounds
Fantastic. But
fantastic.
before we go and rolling the intro video, I'd like to thank you in this case for listening to this podcast. If you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to just give a thumbs up. It means a lot to us to receive that type of love from you, and it helps us a lot to grow the community. So that is one of the asks that we want to do it. So without further ado, let's roll. So welcome back, and let's jump to the first update. So the first update is the generally available a new and improved alert rule creation experience. Like we said on introduction, Azure Monitor. So through the Azure portal, now creating an alert rule is it was simple, I have to say, but now they make it even simpler if that is a word, or they make the rule way more simplified to convert on the wizard, right? So the famous next finish arrives even more to Azure.
Yeah, it's true. It's not going to help that stereotype at
No.
all, but it is an improvement because creating some of the alert rules could be complex depending on the options that you chose. So I really welcome this
Yeah,
improvement.
absolutely. So the thing is, what they announce is they are breaking into a small logical steps, which makes totally easier to follow. So you don't need to be an expert to just creating those rules. And in a lot of cases, it was. I remember a few workshops that I did deliver. that when we going on this, it was simple for us that we are used to that, but I get it that was not as easy with all of those big logical steps that you need to follow, right? And supports more like the part that I like about this update, it's going to resource centric, like Azure centric, right? Resource centric log
Exactly.
alerts. So it's a kind of a good plug uh, for our podcast.
Yeah, I didn't actually catch that earlier in our run through. That's okay. Well done. Well played. Yeah, and it's really interesting because something that I was thinking about along these lines with this update is how we now have, for example, monitoring teams or like the network operating center, the NOC staff that are also responsible for setting up, tuning, and editing rules as time goes on and systems change. So they might not be used to the Azure interface specifically. They might be used to something else that they've used in their on-premises time, right? So as they start to move to Azure Monitor, and it is a very powerful tool, not limited to just Azure, right? So we can use some different tooling in Azure to be able to reach out to our on-prem data centers and things like that, and even AWS data centers as well. I should even just say other data centers, right? So we can bridge that gap now and use Azure Monitor to really help the enterprise get a kind of that, I don't like the word, but it's true in this case, that single pane of glass, that one place to go to view their current status for everything. And I think it's a really great way to help bridge that gap for everybody.
Absolutely. And what I like about this, if we can define, it's basically a three-step process. First, you need to go there and creating the rule, right? After you creating the rule, on the creation on the process of creation the rule, you select the resource. So you're going by your subscription and then your resource group, and then you're going to drill down to your resource that you want to monitor, and then you basically going to the conditions tab and you select what the conditions. And the part that I like about this update is the conditions are attached to the resource that you are monitoring. So if you are monitoring one type of resource, the conditions might different from resource type to resource type. So it's like resource.
Exactly.
That's why we said it's resource centric. So it gives you a setting of all the conditions for all the resource, and sometimes they are not um, applicable. Let's go this way, right? They will
Mhm.
become more easier for the user when they use the portal. Although even the template, okay, it's make it simple as well. It's not only on the portal; it make it simple as well if you are using ARM templates. So it kind
It's
of,
funny because I had the ARM template up here.
and that's the part that I like about this update is that it's not only make it simple on a portal, it make it simple on the ARM template as
Oh, exactly. Yeah, and you and I have been chatting through some, various projects that we work together on, and one of the things that we've been looking at is using Bicep as kind of that customization tool to wrap around ARM templates, the JSON of the ARM template, and be able to make it much more versatile and much more true to that kind of infrastructure as code, right? So this is a really good way to help that standardization and to help build on top of all of those foundations in your own organization or even in your own lab that you're experimenting with this. So it's really cool. I love these little updates that are very small on the surface, but in fact, it's actually quite a big step forwards for the Azure environment
well.
overall.
Absolutely, absolutely. I could not agree more. It's really important to. They are good. It's always even better to improve them, right? And that's the part that we've been talking for a long time on this podcast is the continuous development, the continuous improvement. that even within Azure, within things that works perfectly well, they are always trying to improve that. And that is
Exactly.
the perfect segue for the next one. That is the general availability of 1 minute frequent log alerts. This is huge, right?
This is a big one.
Because I think we talked about this when was in preview. I don't remember how long time
Yes.
was, but I remember talking about this when it was in preview. So log alerts are one type of alerts that they are supported on Azure, correct? And be able to use the log analytics, our query, to evaluate those resource logs, it's massively. Now we can set up that frequency to just 1 minute. So every 1 minute we are sending that log, we are getting those log alerts, and now it's going to be way different, right?
Oh, exactly. So, as we kind of take a bit of a quick look through what this update kind of encompasses. So we can now tune that log query. So if we have it tuned down to, let's say, a single virtual machine
Mm-hmm.
or a single subscription, a single, like one item, right? So one resource, I should say. Now, what we can do is tune that down to 1 minute frequency and we get that delta change. So we're not pulling the whole history every time. I want to just say that I know it might sound obvious to some of us who have used monitoring and log analytics before, but it's important to note that. So we're not having a big data egress. This is about little tidbit, little bite sizes, right? So it's quick, it's short, it's small. And this allows us to have much more responsive kind of logic that we can wrap around the data that comes back from that query. So if we're querying the state of a service on a virtual machine, then we know every 60 seconds approximately that we can get that status and then we can drive action through, say, an Azure function or something like that, whatever we need to do, right? Send an email or send a text message to somebody and let them know that that service status has changed in some way.
Exactly.
So this is a really, really great way to get on top of those kinds of, let's say, challenges in our environments before waiting for users to tell us. And in some cases, before Azure Monitor can even tell us about it, right?
Absolutely. And that's really important, to just like you said, to just doing that, and you have the possibility of multiple resources on that log query, to just using what's called the cross resource query. So you can
Yeah.
query by scheduling that on those 1 minute, in this case logs, to just query that across different resources. It's really important. It's really good that now is GA, right? And that's
Yeah.
the part that we like about this, is you can use this now in production. It was in preview, and now you can use that in production, with more with the full power of the Azure, right?
Oh, exactly. Yeah. And we don't, it's not confined, we should say. So your cross resource query um, got me thinking this isn't confined to just a single VM. And I'm going to say, I hope that my camera isn't going as fuzzy as everything is for me on my end. If it is, I'm very sorry, Marcos, and to all of our viewers. um, the resource query or the log analytics query can also be done on subscription or even on a resource group. So you can know if somebody's deployed something new into the resource group, something's been removed from the resource group, or really monitoring that key infrastructure pieces and keeping a close eye on it. So
Absolutely.
there's some really interesting things that often it's only limited by our imagination and our problem solving skills, right? So
Exactly. And that's usually, it's difficult to manage. Our imagination is too wide open, and sometimes we
some
try.
days it can be.
Yeah,
Yeah,
some days we
yeah,
can be, absolutely. So regarding, still on the same subject, and to moving to the next topic, is the schedule of Query Rules API preview version 2021 0201 will be retired in January 2031 of January 2021 22.
That's right. Coming up at the end
The
of
month.
this January.
Yeah.
So coming up pretty quick, right?
Yeah. And again, this is the part, it goes really well on what we were talking about regarding general availability, regarding previews, and all of that. Because when you deploy something that is in preview, usually you are deploying on a different type of resources, right? And that's why we're saying that please do not use this in production, because when it becomes general availability, usually you need to redeploy that again. And this is a very good example of that we've been kind of preaching in this case on this podcast. Is one of the main reasons of not of using this of using the preview uh, of the functionalities and features that Azure provide us is this type of occasions. That's why we want to bring
Exactly.
this to the podcast, because right now,
Yeah,
at the end
precisely.
of the
Right.
month,
A lot of people get
yeah,
caught with that.
at the end of the month, if we were using these query rules API, it will not be longer available, and then everything that you built is going to be gone at the end of the month, right? So it's really
Exactly.
important for you to just use the ARM template that is available, and redeploy this in the redeploy again, because now it's GA, okay, before the end of the month. Otherwise, it comes Monday. I think 31st of January comes Monday. This case, it comes Tuesday,
Yes.
the 1st of February, and your
They
stop
stop
working.
working. Yeah.
Okay. And don't tell
Yeah.
us.
And when you phone Azure support, they're going to say, "Ooh, sorry. Yeah, you were using something
Yeah.
from
Or
preview."
even if you tweet us, we're going to say that we told you so. Did you watch? Did you watch the
Absolutely. So,
podcast?
so this really underscores how important it is to, even if in your organization or in our own home labs or our Azure labs, if we don't do infrastructure as code in one flavor or another, how important it is that when we deploy these things to save the ARM templates from that
Yes.
deployment so that we can redeploy it later if needed. This is the later
Yeah,
if
exactly.
needed, right?
But there is another thing that they mention on this blog post, right? That is really important, because when becomes GA, okay, usually all the previews, okay, you start paying. In this case, this preview, I remember we talk about that was in end of November timeframe. That was GA, something like that. And since then, you are being charged. So there are two things. First and foremost, this is going to be retired at the end of January. And since, let's say, the last quarter of 2021, kind of at the end of that quarter, you've been charging for this. So you are paying for something that was in preview. That's the second thing. And
Yep.
if you don't move quickly, you will, in this case, stop the service that you are paying for. So if you don't notice that, probably you will notice on this on January, in this case, bill cycle. Um, just redeploy it. It's going to be simple for you with no stress. And if you need some help, let us know. We can guide you without any problem, right, Andrew? Especially you that you have a little bit more
Absolutely.
free time now. I'm just kidding.
Well, not
Exactly.
necessarily, right? So, all good things must come to an
Exactly.
end, right? So,
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's move to the next one. Okay. And the next one, like we're talking about Azure Monitor alerts, is the GA of the Azure Monitor log alerts as a new version. So this new version, okay, have a lot of exciting features. Okay. What was one of that you want to bring it up as to give you the stage to talk about?
Well, because we've kind of talked about the kind of the humor of the next finish, let's talk about the wizard-based alert rule creation experience, right? So that's part of this new deployment with Azure Monitor log alerts. We did kind of we had a little bit of fun at its expense, but it is a big feature, right? Because like we've said, not everybody is doing infrastructure as code,
Yes.
for example, right? Not everybody has a large enterprise environment that they need to have that kind of scale. So they might have maybe two VMs in. In fact, I know quite a few different clients that we have together that have just a handful of single digit resources in Azure because they're not ready to go there yet. They want to understand it. They have to use it for one or two products, maybe even, let's say. But uh, other than that, they're not ready to move in that space yet. And that's okay, right? Not everybody is going to be in public cloud. Um, that's just the reality. And they don't need to learn all of these new things, ARM templates and JSON, and, do we need to know CLI? They do need to know that for their own careers. I think it's important. We always just gather knowledge, like you say, continuous improvement. It applies to oneself as well, right? We always have to be learning and getting better and doing new things. That's how we advance the whole industry. And it's part of why well, at least for you and I, at a personal level, why we do this podcast is to try to share some of that with everybody, right? So that they can soak up some of this new stuff too. But I'm getting a bit philosophical because I've had too much time to think.
No, not at
so,
all. What I
so
yeah,
I,
what I like about this,
I just thought it was a great update,
absolutely.
and I think it's important that we all improve. I'm gonna let you take the
That's
stage here.
no, that's okay. This is the conversation. It's not about staging, but this version is the version of August 1st. Okay, so first of all,
It
that we're
is.
talking about, this is exactly the same version that on the previous update that we are talking about. So again, we've been on this the version of the API that we are talking about regarding the log alerts. Okay, so another thing that I like about this, as we mentioned, I think on this podcast, it was the resource centric alerting. So supports in this case all resource types, and these alerts are going to be resource centric. So meaning that the type of resource it will influentiate on the logs as well, not only on the alerts, right, but on the logs that you are receiving. And because of that, you have the alerts on top of that, because you need someone, or need something in this case, to trigger that alert, and that will be the log in this case. So that's the part that I like it. The other one that is really exciting is how you can manage this at scale. Like you mentioned,
Yeah.
right? You can have one paging of subscriptions with resource that you can have more than 6,000 alerts rules. So it's pretty cool not to having like alerts for a specific log analytics, for example. Now the log analytics, and we saw a lot of that, right? We saw a lot of those sprawl of log analytics workspace, because they
Oh my.
tendency to create one on log analytics for each application. And then it's difficult to manage, because each one on analytics you have a different rule sets, and sometimes you will have different rules and all of that. So the work that Microsoft is doing right now on Azure, especially on the Azure Monitor, is to have everything almost in the side, in the same kind of Work Analytics workspace, that you can manage, and you can have alerts for the entire subscription, which makes totally sense.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because it's about management at scale, right?
Exactly.
So if we think about, I guess I can relate this to a personal story, right? So when I think about the first time I managed like 35 servers, I thought, wow, this is really tricky. You got to think about how you're doing everything and how everything interacts. There's 35 things going on. And then in my own career, I was kind of the next step. Okay, so, well, now I have 150 servers, and then there was a few hundred, and then 600. And we've seen some pretty big environments, kind of you and I over the years now. And when we think about how we manage 30 servers versus 3,000 servers, there's a big difference, right? So we have to think about how we operate at scale. And it's the same thing with log analytics rules. So we have to make sure that we do everything with that consideration of scaling out, scaling up. How does this get bigger? How does it grow? And it's just part of the whole ecosystem. And really, that's one of the beautiful things about Azure is you can deploy something in a very simplistic way, an ARM template, and have it scale. And it takes care of it, kind of a, let's
Absolutely.
just say magically for today.
Absolutely. And I could not agree. I could not agree more. Absolutely. You are right. Spot on that. Uh,
So I do have one question for you,
absolutely.
and I know it kind of leads into the next one, but what is one of your favorite ways to help manage things at scale when we talk about code deployment?
So it's Azure DevOps in this case. It's one of my. I use Azure DevOps for a lot of things, and I got inspired by my good friends and my extended family, the MVPs as well. In this case, that they are using this for a lot of other things besides code management, and that's where I opened
Okay,
my eyes. I had a very good friend that he used Azure DevOps, kidding or not, to develop or to write his master thesis. And if you think correctly, it's pretty awesome to have that. So a project doesn't need to be only source code, right? It doesn't need to be development. Of course, that it's DevOps by the name, but this update, the general availability of Azure DevOps updates, it's pretty significant for me as a general. And then was always a difficult part of it. It's now you can assign the Azure DevOps administration to Azure AD group. Finally,
yeah, that's massive,
that's
massive
it's
improvement.
the first
I
one.
want to say about time,
Yeah.
but I don't want to be mean about it because it's just
It
fantastic. I'm
is.
so happy it's
I'm
here.
so happy because it's so easy now, and with that, because of that, you can now have PIM, right, associated. You can have all of those type of things happening because until this time, until this update, you have to be the Azure DevOps administrator, and you go and you
That's
having
right.
going to Azure DevOps and you're giving like, let's call it the global admin kind of um,
Exactly.
to
One at a
one at a
time, right?
time, and there is no control. We don't know what is been doing, what is been the actions that you've been doing, and now with PIM
And
we
that
have the
that
log
was
trail.
always the thing that, yeah, that always put me off a little bit. Like 2 years ago, when kind of DevOps really started to gain a lot of traction, right? And I don't remember when it came out exactly, so I'm not going to speak to that. I'm just going to say when I first touched it about 2 years ago, I remember thinking, well, why wasn't this built on top of RBAC? It doesn't make any sense in my head. Like the structure itself, to me, should have been built on top of the RBAC framework. That, in my mind and kind of in my heart, is what Azure is all about. Is
Absolutely.
that ease of management and security, because a lot of Azure is built with security first as the principle, right? And to have DevOps kind of, let's say, in a different place was really unusual. It didn't feel like it was part of the family. So now it really is. It's part of the whole family. So now we can tier access. We can do all the things we can do with group management.
Yes,
Absolutely amazing. So
it
impressive.
is. And if you see Azure DevOps is nothing more than like, for example, the Office 365 is a SaaS solution, right?
Exactly.
So be able to create that part of it, it's huge, especially for us that we are all working with security all the time. It's massive, and it's really the important part of it. But it's
is.
not only the update on Azure DevOps. We have a lot of other things to cover on this, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things I want to talk about is kind of if we think about towards the bottom of that list in the pipeline is the deprecation of two images, the Mac OS 10.14 and the Windows 2016.
Yes.
What? We're retiring, deprecating Windows 2016 already? Well, it is 2022, right? So
It is.
as new and shiny as it feels and sounds to me in my head still, it is 6 years old, right?
And it's not
So
only that, we have two other versions. Okay.
that's right. So Server 2022 is now current version,
Yes.
and
And you still have
we should be
2019 as well.
exactly. And kind of further up that list is now we have default agent spec for the classic pipelines is now with Windows 2019.
Exactly.
So we're really it's about kind of just continuous improvement, like we keep saying this pod. Maybe that's what the theme is, right? Continuous improvement. But it's about just stepping up, going to the next server versions, making sure that we stay current. Helps us to stay more secure and compatible with all of the kind of the current feature sets that integrate with everything else, right? So it's a really good thing. But I thought it was a bit telling because deprecating Windows 2016 kind of caught me a little bit in my heart because it was like, oh, already? But it's time,
It is.
right? It is time to
It is
move.
time.
So
One of the things that I like about the updates that they did it on Azure Pipelines, it becomes the first one that is the automatic retries for a task, because a lot of
that's a thing.
it's a big one, because especially for us that we are working and we sometimes you need to do a task that it doesn't run because something is not finished, and you have the maximum retries allows you to do that. So allows you to rerun the pipeline to have it succeeded, right? And it might have a flanky task that fails intermittently, right, in a
Yep.
pipeline, and this allows you to just moving on because
It's error control for the pipeline. That's really what
exactly,
it is, right?
exactly. So now you can put a number of try or retries in this case on that to be able to do that. The other one that I like is the improvements that they did on the service connection just for the user of
Yeah.
user story history, right? So to be able to see when you are deploying this, right, with the service connection, to have a kind of history to say, okay, it fails because my connection, right, was not good at that time, and that is tremendously right, to be able to use that and be logged the connection history, so you lost the connection or not lost the connection, helps in this case for us administrators and for us that we are supporting to get more insight about that. So
Exactly.
pretty cool about those type of things, right?
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I do really like that one because it kind of it talks to what I talk about lots, which is connecting logs and gathering that information. First of all, it gives us good diagnostic information so we can fix things when they break, because that happens.
Yeah.
That's why we're still employed, right? Things break. So please don't fix it too much.
Exactly. But there is
But
one,
you know,
yeah,
we
absolutely. Continue.
well, I was just going to say it's important to have those types of logging enabled on our Azure resources so that we can trace everything as well and we can understand those relationships.
Absolutely. But there is another one that I like about this, not related to Azure pipelines, but regarding to reporting, because we all have our love for project managers, right? And they always ask for an update. And sometimes, right, they want to see a kind of reporting. And the best way to do that is to copy the dashboard. Okay. And
Mm-hmm.
finally, they got a button that you can do it, copy the dashboard, okay, and you put it on wherever you want it, okay. So you can put it on on email or whatever it is, and you copy that dashboard over, or even to another project. If you like that
Yep.
dashboard, right? Even to another project, you can copy the dashboard and putting over there, which is amazing.
And it's right. And it's interesting because I've been using kind of a little known feature in Azure. Maybe it's not little known, but little used, is sharing dashboards.
Yes.
And outside of DevOps, but our Azure dashboard, when we log in portal.azure.com, you can publish those and you can publish them using RBAC. And it's really cool to be able to publish that to your team and say, okay, go to dashboard 1, dashboard 2, and people can rename them as they need to. But when you update it, it updates the dashboard for your whole team.
Exactly.
It's really, really cool.
Exactly.
So this is very similar to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And those were in this case the Azure DevOps updates. In this case for this blog post, right? Anything else you want to cover on Azure DevOps before we moving to the next one?
I think I'm good. There's a lot in there. So if you're a regular user of Azure DevOps, as most of us are who consume this podcast, jump in, have a look at that update. There's a lot of good meat and potatoes in there. Really cool stuff that's out now.
Absolutely. So moving to the next one, and is the public preview of managed certificate support for Azure API management. Okay. This is tremendously, because it's still, again, is in preview. Okay, first and foremost. Okay. So please use.
Not in production,
use,
not with
exactly.
certificates. Oh my gosh.
You just took the words from my mouth.
I just had this nightmare vision. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Definitely not anywhere near prod. And be careful because it's certificates. They can be a bit finicky.
Yeah.
And that was why I got excited when this one came out. I remember we were messaging together and I said, hey, Marcos, check this one out. This is really useful. We have you and I have that other project on the side we're working on, and it's going to be very useful in that case, but not quite yet because we can't push it into production, darn it. But it's really close. Public preview. So private preview has completed. Public preview has started now. And being able to manage the SSL cert using API management, Azure API management, that's amazing. And to do automated renewals, oh, you're speaking my language now. Take that off of the plate. That's the biggest nightmare with certificates, in my opinion, is the maintenance of them. Not the first part where you get it, you're excited, you put it in, you configure, you get it working, everybody's so happy. Oh man, it's a year later and you have to renew the cert, and now everything breaks. Yeah. That's going to be a thing of the past with this kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
Right?
And I remember this, when all of this of managing certificates, it's so important. It goes to one project that I had that I was bringing on to just kind of improve. Started with monitoring an application, and then when I started to poke around and to see the resources and to see all of that, to try to understand the application, I discovered that the certificates were almost expiring. And managing, in that case, that application and managing the certificates to just change to the new certificate was a nightmare. The application was down because it was not simple to just update. You have too many layers to update this. And now imagine on the API management. So you have custom domains, you have the free, you have the domains that coming with the service, right? The Azure-API.net, that is the domain that by default Azure assigns. Of course, that you can have your custom domains, but now imagine having a gazillion of different, depending on the version of the API management that you're having, right? To have those certificates, be able to effortlessly to just secure that with API management and with the certificate, SSL certificate, and be able to change it at, in this case, at all the tiers with no cost and simple, it's a dream come true, because we always get nervous when we get the point of every 2 years that we are changing those
Well,
certificates.
it's worse because now it's every year, right? We can no longer do
Yes.
24-month SSLs. We have to do 12-month. So I totally foresee the day where they change their mind again and say, no, it has to be every 6 months. So they'll keep tightening it down, and then they'll figure out a better way to do it, right? But
It
the one
is.
thing that kind of jumped out for me on this one is this kind of automation piece that manages the certificate handles the APIM gateway, the developer portal, the management portal, and the SCM. So it really is kind of that full suite with API management when it comes to your SSL certificate. And it does that for the custom domain, the endpoints for the custom domains, right?
Yeah.
So if you have 3 or 4 of those certificates, instead of having to go and update this manually on each of these configurations, you set it, and once it's tested and is then validated and it moves to general availability, it will truly be a set it and forget it.
That's the part that I was talking about,
Yeah,
because the part of be able to doing this without almost any effort, doing once and apply to all of those layers, it's going to be tremendously, because if you apply, and even we can even bring that discussion um, to right now, is even if you apply in to one of those, like the gateway, developer portal, the management, and the SCM, which is the order that you should apply for, right? Because if you apply on the gateway, that is your gateway, that is your external point of it, but then you will have errors applying that to, for example, the management part, so you cannot manage, or to
exactly.
the developer portal, and so on and so forth, right? So be able to do these like in one, and automatically the system does that for you. It's tremendous. It just gives us way more kind of uh, sleep nights with peace, and not
Right?
getting nervous of that time, and trying to do it, and even decrease the window, so you can do this. You don't need to do this after hours. You can do this on
Yeah,
different times, so it allows you to just go
exactly.
that. Oh, yeah. And that's, I think it's really important for these managed certificates, because it's always been a pain since I start working on IT
Oh, forever.
in, I don't know, I was more than 20 years
A
ago.
couple years
Yeah, a
ago,
couple
right?
years ago. Yeah,
Yeah.
a couple of dozens years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, and the one thing I was thinking of, and I wish I wish it was mentioned in the Microsoft Docs that supports this update behind the scenes, is monitoring. So it's really cool to use automation to deploy certificates, manage certificates in an automated way. Now, the one thing that always comes into my mind, and it's part of best practices to have good monitoring in place already. So I think maybe that's might be Microsoft's position on this one. But I would really love to see an honorable mention for Azure Monitor here to keep a close eye on that SSL certificate on the HTTPS or the 443, whatever port you're using, if a custom port, then to use Azure Monitor to let you know when there's a problem with the certificate. Because if something happens, especially while in preview, and you're testing it, you would have to test it after as well to know about any issues. And the whole idea of automation is set it and forget it, like we were saying. And you would need monitoring in place to be able to tell you about any challenges or issues that pop up from those certificate changes. So I'd like to see that. And if you're using this in your testing environment, um, hey, let us know how you're going to address that and how you monitor your APIM certificates. What do you have in place today? Drop us into YouTube chat or on Twitter and let us know at what is it? Hashtag Azure Centric.
Yeah, exactly. And you can even follow us, and with that we come to our the end of our podcast. So don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to just um, put some comments on or just shoot us in a message. Like we have several ways. You have all of our in this case social media available, even on the description of this podcast. Even if you are listening, you probably don't see the description. But if you are seeing from one of the ways that you can see this podcast, you will see on the description all the all the social media that you can find us. So thank you, Andrew, one more time for being part of the show. It's been a pleasure, and I hope that you stay a little bit longer. Or if you feel as if you have some kind of missing us over here at the north side of it, um, just come just come back home. We are more than welcome to have you here.
I appreciate you having me back, and rest assured, I think in the next little while I will be returning home. I'm ready to come home.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So, for you that you are listening to this podcast, thank you for now. Bye, and see you next week.